for the normal people. But yeah, we all know that one rich communist kid that doesn't actually work, and they get really uppity. They're like, we need to destroy the bourgeoisie. Like, motherfucker, you are the bourgeoisie. That's Marx, right? Lenin was an old fool. Trotsky was a fucking pussy. And as Stalin's mother said, he would have been better as a priest. Joseph Stalin went to his mother's house, and it was after World War II. It was like I think it was in the late 40s, early 50s. Maybe not. It might have been earlier than that. I don't know exactly when this happened. It might have very well been after he took control, after he ran Trotsky out of Russia. But, he goes to his mom, and he's like, Mom, you know how the Tsar was? I'm pretty much like what the Tsar was. And his mom was just straight up like, you would have been better as a priest and not an evil person like you are. She didn't say that last part, but it kind of worked out like that. But moral of the story is, it's almost like centrally planning everything fucking sucks, and a lawless egalitarian society will blow up in your face. And there's hardly ever been a school of thought that is so completely ran by bad faith. Like so basically the Russian Civil War was, you take all the violent thugs in a country, all the malcontents, all the just truly ugly people, and then you make them into an army. And then you have them kill all the regular productive people. And the regular productive people, they have lives, and they're not filled with hatred and anger. So they're not as good at, counter-revolutionary actions as the violent, angry malcontents are at murdering them. So the good guys eventually got swamped. But that was after like 5 years of civil war. Because there was a lot of turmoil in Russia at the time. And one of the biggest turmoil was there was no actual assembly for the Russian people to vote. There was no universal democracy. So after universal democracy was attained and the Russian Constituent Assembly was formed, that was a big demand from the Bolsheviks. They were like, we need the people to vote. And then the people voted, and the Bolsheviks lost. So when the assembly was held for 13 hours in January of 1918, it was dissolved by the Bolsheviks. And people actually came out to support that little assembly, and then the Bolsheviks shot them. It wasn't going the malcontents' way, and then they found out that universal suffrage sucks when you don't win. Here's Lenin's kind of take on what happened in there. He was basically just like, formal democracy is impossible because of class conflicts. We're fighting the people that don't want to be part of us in Ukraine. We're fighting the rural folk, the cowboys of Russia, the Cossacks. They don't want to be part of this. So, they're fucking idiots who hate us. And the Soviets are going to run the Constituent Assembly from now on. And then that just didn't happen. So basically said, listen to us or we're going to send our army of ex-convicts to shoot you. That's the beginning. That's the Constituent Assembly, essentially. And then later that year, a famine happened. Shocker. Does anybody want to guess? I'll give you guys like 10 seconds to guess why the famine happened. So the famine happened because they decentivized productivity. Basically what they said was, there's no reason for you to make any more than you can personally consume, because we'll punish you if you profit off this at all. And people are like, well, I'm not going to profit off of it. Why should I make anything more than I can consume? So there was a big famine, and it was blamed on, a kulak is a landowner that owns like multiple pieces of property and rents it out to people, to make a little more money, have some nice things. And, Lenin just straight up said, there was a peasant insurrection. The poor people were like, wow, this isn't getting any better. This is actually getting substantially worse. And he was like, do you know what we need to do? We need to publicly hang at least 100 people. You know, kulaks, rich men, and bloodsuckers. Anybody who's not an ex-con and not a lazy, drunk piece of shit basically got killed in the villages. That's what that was. The kulaks were like the only productive people in the countryside. And then they killed all of them. Yeah, I don't know. I think I just need to hammer in that it is the lowest common denominator of people are communists. They're not productive people. They're not intelligent people. They're not strong people. They're not empathetic people. They're not caring people. They are the dregs of society. Have you ever seen the heat map? You know, the heat map thing where it's like people who skew right have like a closer connection to those around them and their loved ones, and then it kind of stays pretty consistent all the way out to like the greatest like abstract thought, like all living creatures in the universe. It's a little less caring about all creatures in the universe versus their family. But then you get the left skewing one, and basically they don't care about their family at all, and they care about all living beings in the universe more. And that kind of goes to show with the communism thing. It's an endemic levels of people just turning in their fucking families to the Soviet police because they think it'll benefit them, and they don't realize it's a self-licking ice cream cone, and that they are the tongue that is licking off their family to make sure the Soviet state maintains itself, because it can't maintain itself other than violence. And lowest common denominator, Joseph Stalin. You know, he that guy was a piece of work. He was. Stalin, I think, it'd be a good phrase for him. A piece of work. He was the mad dog of the Red Army. Lenin said he was a psycho. Trotsky knew he was a psycho. Basically, everyone knew he was a psycho and knew that he couldn't have power. But in a wonderful, wonderful place like the Soviet Union, where there's no universal democracy because the Constituent Assembly is run by the Soviets, it just kind of has to go with what the angriest, meanest, most fucked up person in the party says, and that was Stalin. So he took control, and he kind of pulled a Kamala Harris there, you know. He rejected the 5-year plan in 1926 after it was suggested by Trotsky, because Trotsky was like, these 1-year plans, you can't do enough of it in a year, and whatever goals you set in a year is going to be unrealistic because it's just too short of a time frame to actually do anything. But, you know, that happened, and then he got ran out of Russia because he was like he fought Stalin, basically. That's all that happened. He decided to go up against like one of the most evil people in history. And then he got stabbed with an ice pick in Mexico. But that's a whole other thing. The revolution always eats its own children. That's a big thing in history. You got to remember. Anytime there's a revolution, except for the American Revolution, that was the only revolution that like actually ended well. Which is why America is the best. You know, there were no like bloody purges after the American Revolution, but there were after the French Revolution, the revolutions of 1848, Mexican Revolution, every revolution everywhere except for the United States, there were bloody purges. Because as Americans, we are God's people, and that's why we defeated the Soviet Union in the Cold War, and why they could never have nice things. But what was the 5-year plan? You're talking about this 5-year plan. What could be the 5-year plan? Well, the 5-year plan, it was a plan to make the USSR great, because it wasn't great. It was not industrialized at all. Like dirt roads everywhere, peasants everywhere. It was not a nice place to live. And that's kind of why they had a revolution, because the Tsar was a dickhead. But like, it was just a bad Tsar at a bad time. If he had a little more backbone and been able to give power more to the Duma, he probably could have avoided the Russian Revolution and the suffering Russia went through for 70 years after this. But it happens. Everybody goofs. You don't always get good leadership in a inherited autocracy, But like this fucker had 2 revolutions in his time. So I think that's bad. It's a bad look. If you have 2 violent uprisings after you lose 2 fucking wars to people that you probably should have beat. Because the 1905 revolution, that was caused by the defeat at the hands of the Japanese in the Russo-Japanese War in 1904 and 1905. So that happened because, the Russians' boats, they sank. Right? So that sucked. But yeah, so, and then the 1917 revolution caused by, like, World War One. So, God, I'm so, where the fuck was I? Oh yeah, they needed to make the USSR great. The 5-year plan just put in insanely unrealistic quotas. It had huge demands for productivity increases, had land redistribution on the table, and it wanted to maximize industrial output. Now, these are 2 very unrealistic things to do in 5 years. Rome wasn't built in a day, and the Soviet Union isn't going to get built in 5 years. And Stalin found that out at the end of the 5 years, so he made another 5-year plan that also sucked. But, it was getting them closer and closer and closer, and it really, if it weren't for these 5-year plans, they would have just gotten shit on by Germany. Like, straight up, they would have not survived at all. He was the one that was like, we need tanks and planes and a huge ass army because everybody in the world rightfully hates us because we're a bunch of bloodthirsty psychos who want to tear down the planet and remake it in our own shitty image. That's what communism is. It's all just revolution. Communism is a threat, right? Because it is coercive. It forces you to be communist. That's the difference between, I think that's the difference between capitalism and communism. Is capitalism kind of like coalesced out of people wanting to be free and have free trade, and communism is a reaction by a lazy rich boy who literally never read anything before in his life. Because if he had, he'd understand utopian societies and how they literally always turn out into either like sex cults or violent dictatorships, but usually sex cults in the U.S. because we're way more chill here. We had a bunch of utopian societies that worked okay, but they were like 30 people in Ohio. It wasn't an entire country full of people who just fought a bunch of wars and were ready to murder each other. So back to the main thing. So they had insane quotas they needed to reach, and they didn't reach them, but it did increase industrial output, peasant productivity, redistribution of land, and everything. But there were several things that are like not cool that happened. Like, as an American, I hate unions. I think they're gay. I think unions are the worst thing on the planet. I love Henry Ford. He was better than any union. But the Soviet Union apparently hates unions more than me because during the 5-year program, unions were actually just being straight up shut down. And workers were no longer allowed to strike and had no protection whatsoever. So they showed up late or missed a day because they were dying of some weird communist illness. There was nothing they could do. They were just like, well, I guess I'm fucking fired. And then they have to go work in the mines or get shot in the head, whichever one they pick. Because, you can't go start your own fucking business in the Soviet Union. You can't do anything productive. They couldn't even start a podcast. Imagine that. Maybe those poor guys that were all trampled over in the 5 years programs could have averted death if they had started a podcast. That's why Americans are better. We're ingenuitive. We start podcasts. But yeah, we'll skip the violent bloody purges that completely wiped out Soviet military leadership in the lead up to World War II. Wait, you guys didn't know that happened? Yeah, the Soviet leadership of the military was just decimated by Stalin's paranoia because he was like, some of these people might be able to compete with me, and the people hate them less. I need to kill them. So that happened. So going into World War One, they had no military leadership, right? And any of the leadership that wasn't dead was probably in Gulag. Like there was a Soviet general in World War II who had his teeth beaten out during a very routine beating by his by his bosses. You know, just had the shit kicked out of him. He had his teeth, like his teeth were busted. So he had to get steel teeth, which is pretty cool. A Soviet general in World War II walking around with steel teeth, and you know how good the Soviets are at gaslighting you, or how bad the Nazis are. I don't know which one. How good the Soviets are, or how bad the Nazis are. That after he was imprisoned in Gulag and had his teeth beaten out, he still fought for the Soviet Union. Isn't that inspiring of how awful the Nazis were to make something like that happen? Right? So World War II comes along, and Hitler's like, Eichwagen, der kein Liebentraum, we must take the Polish. But that's a mistranslation. He was actually talking about getting his nail polish off, but they heard him say use the chemicals to nail the Polish. So that's why Germany invaded Poland. Just a mistranslation. Simple mistakes, you know, that changes the course of world history. So that's why Hitler was always angry the rest of the war, because he couldn't get his nail polish off. It was still stuck in like the 1939 look of black nail polish, and they were getting more to green, you know, more earthy tones later in the war. But so yeah, they do that. They had a non-aggression pact with the fucking Nazis, and then you know, after the Nazis invaded Poland on September 1st, 1939, the Soviets were like, oh, our turn, and then they invaded Poland too. But everybody forgets about that because the Marxists have taken over the universities, right? That's really the only reason I have to be talking about this shit, because nobody else is going to talk about how skeevy and backstabbing and conniving the fucking communists are. Think about it. They invade Poland, and then they're like, yeah, the Nazis are cool. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, we love that, because that means we don't have to fight our neighbors, right? And then they invaded Poland. Not Poland, Finland. They invaded too many lands. Too many fucking lands. They invaded Finland, too, and just got their shit rocked. Partially because they had no leadership, because Stalin put them all into Gulag. But, you know, that happens. And then, you know, they're anti-imperialist. Of course. They just want all this land. Like, that's why they starved the Ukrainians, because they were like, Ukrainians, you don't know what's good for you. We know what's good for you. We know what's best for you, Ukraine. So we're going to starve 7 million of you to death. I think it's a good plan. I don't know about you guys, but I think that was a bitchin' plan by the Soviets. And then, yeah, you know, say what you will about the Nazis, but at least they had integrity. They had more integrity than the Soviets. Let's be real here. Like, you know, when Japan fucked up majorly and attacked Pearl Harbor and basically ruined any Axis chance of winning World War II? You know how Germany was like, you know what? Solidarity, brother. Threw a fist up and declared war on the U.S. too, and then got fucked by the United States. Do you know what the Soviet Union did? They said they were scared of the Japanese, and were like, we're gonna leave this out. We're gonna keep our non-aggression pact with the Japanese, because, you know, as the Russians, we can only fight on one front because we're fucking ass. They're ass. I know that I said that they were the best ones at Blitzkrieg in my other rant video, but that's just because they had waves of men and tanks. That's the only reason they were better than Germany. Their tactics weren't any better. No, their tactics actually were a lot better, especially towards 1945, after they had been fighting almost constantly for 3 years, and the good generals were taken out of Gulag. Well, all the good generals that weren't killed were taken out of Gulag, you know. That happens. But yeah, that happens, and then, you know how much we helped them out? Ian, how much money did the United States give to the Soviet Union to help them beat the Nazis in World War II? Do you know how much money?
10 trillion.
Close, $11 billion. And then after that, they didn't want to pay it back, so we were like, hey, you know what? Only pay us $1.3 billion. You know? That's all we need. It's nothing crazy. Give us like a tenth of what you owe us. And they were like, no. And then they drug it out until 1972. You know, they were like, we're gonna make them wait for us to pay it back. And then they negotiated down to $722 million in 1972, which if you adjust for, that's $1972 too. So if you put inflation into account, it's less than a quarter of the tenth that we asked for them back. They didn't finish paying that until nearly 20 years after that, after the fall of the Soviet Union. They left it on the Russian provisional government after the Soviet Union fell to pay off the rest of that, rather than just have some balls and pay back your fucking money. They took grain aid from us. They took so much aid from us. They stole technology from us. They would not have had a nuclear bomb until 1963 if it weren't for us and the fucking Rosenbergs stealing our fucking technology. They are subversive and they suck and I hate them. Go out and hate a communist today. You know how much, like, the Soviet Union fucked up the Allied war efforts? We had to do the island hopping campaign because we couldn't touch Japan because we were too far away from them. We had to fight for 3 years instead of just taking it to Japan. Because the Soviets were like, we don't want to start none with the Japanese, even though they're allied with the people that they're allied with our global enemies. We don't want to fight them because we're a bunch of fucking pussies. We're the Soviet Union. We should have been like, hey, Japan and Germany, go nuts, kill all of them, please. But we didn't. The only thing that saved the Soviet Union in the Second World War was their incompetence. We knew the Nazis and the Japanese were a genuine threat, and the Soviets were just a bunch of angry drunk malcontents. That's literally all the Soviet Union ever was. It's a bunch of drunk malcontents. That's Russia today. They're a bunch of drunk malcontents. God, I hate Russia. I hate China. We're gonna, more Soviet scumbag stuff. You want to hear about fucking China? Holy shit. The Chinese Communist Party. Just bad. Very bad. They like to steal U.S. tech too. That's another country we should have let the Japanese just fucking ravage. Unit 731 did not do enough, in my humble opinion. We should not have helped the Chinese whatsoever. We should have actually helped Japan fight the Chinese. 2020 hindsight. I know these are hot takes, but like thinking about it, holy shit. Tough. Because I think more people are going to die in the end because of the Soviet Union and the Chinese Communist Party in the next world war they fucking start than the Japanese ever could have killed. And even if it would have killed more, I don't care. No, that's hateful to talk about the Chinese like that. That's not very polite. I'm just thinking about all the skeevy shit China has always done. Do you guys know that the Sino-Soviet split happened because the Russians didn't declare war on us a couple times? The whole Cuban Missile Crisis thing? The Chinese were like, we want war with America. And the Russians were like, dude, that's really silly. That's going to hurt everybody. The Chinese are like, no, we want war. Like, you guys remember the Korean War? We didn't even... China just declared war on the UN because we were too close to their border. It's like, yeah, there's a conflict in a neighboring country. People are going to get too close to your border. MacArthur didn't really say that we should leave a 60-mile belt of irradiated cobalt to make sure the Chinese have a permanently demilitarized zone. But what he was actually saying is... Somebody asked him, one of his superiors asked him, like, hey, if this shit really popped off, where are you going to nuke? He's like, I'd nuke here, 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 and here. But the Chinese are so bad that many people are like, yeah, that would have been a very reasonable thing to just make a belt of irradiated cobalt. And then you wouldn't have the hermit kingdom of North Korea. anymore. You would just have a nice place like South Korea. You know, it's funny that the only people who ever defect to North Korea are either black or pedophiles. So I don't know what that means. It's just an observation. I think the last guy to flee to North Korea actually was a black pedophile. So he filled up both marks. I don't know how they treat black people in North Korea. I bet it's very... They give them one more bug to show that they actually care about black people. I think that's what they do. This has been a hysterically accurate rant about communism and all the subversive activities. I truly do dislike communism with like all my heart. It's not a good thing. It's not a helpful thing. Even though your life may not be getting much better in capitalism, the thing about capitalism is at least you can maintain, a nice quality of life. Communism, it just gets worse. It always gets so much worse under communism. That's really the takeaway from this. If you see a communist, just show them this podcast. Tell them what's going on, because it's really tough. Because communists are fucking idiots. That's all. There's the tweet. This has been hysterically accurate. Thanks for putting up with my shit. Like, review, subscribe. This is probably going to be going on Spotify and YouTube. I'm going to get some background video. Probably me playing War of Rights later when I publish this biatch. But yeah, thanks for listening. You guys have a good one. Next episode of the Vietnam series is going to be dropping on Wednesday. I don't know the date. It's Saturday now, so it's like Wednesday the 4th, I think. 4th of September is going to be the drop date for that. So we're all very much looking forward to that. And thanks for listening. This has been Hysterically Accurate. Adios.